All right. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Howard Falco. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's absolutely my pleasure. Honored to be on.
Yeah, no doubt. So I got a chance to dive into the work that you're doing, as I just mentioned off air, this connection of spiritual coaching with mindset coaching and kind of, bridging those gaps together. And they're not individual, but figuring out how they connect together. You've done such a powerful job of the work that you've done with this. So getting a
Thank
chance
you.
to dive into your recent book, Invincible, which is out right now. But then also the books beforehand, you had I Am, The Power of Discovery of Who You Really Are, and then Time in a Bottle, which is Mastering the Experience of Life. Um, what I wanted to ask is anybody who has been an author for a while, has the process of writing changed for you since your first book to the most recent one?
The process is the same for me, which is I go into a room, I close the door, I let the words spill out without editing anything. I just let it pour out. But the messaging and crafting the message that I want to be more focused on for the reader with the intention of what the cover says,
Mhm.
that has been more conscious. Before it was just coming out of me in an unconscious way, and it came out great. I'm very happy with the previous two works, but this was more pointed in delivering on the title of the book.
Mhm. Yeah, it seems like it's much different coming from a coaching world where you've worked with a lot of people in coaching, where when you're speaking with somebody, you can shift and adjust the message based on the
Right.
person. But when you have a book and it's like, here it
That's so
is,
true.
here's what I wrote,
Yeah.
it's a very different process. Did you feel that distinction?
Yeah, there's definitely an art to speaking to as many people as you possibly can while feeling very personal to the reader.
Mhm.
And I've been blessed with my work that it comes out in a very personal way towards the reader. But I wanted it to come out so people could realize it could cover any area of life, whether it's relationships, business, sports performance, or spirituality. It's
Mhm.
the same process of self-realization that gets them the empowerment in those areas.
Yeah. Do you have a process of making sure you're on point with that? Like, is it, you said like kind of word vomit out and then go back in editing. Are you conscious about that in writing, or is it more like let that part of you go to get the words out and then
Correct.
go back to it the next time?
I don't want to be conscious while I'm writing, if that makes, I know it sounds a little bit weird. I want to be conscious about what my intent is
Mhm.
in writing, but I don't want to be hyper conscious around editing it. I want to let it flow out. And the process that I have is I simply read it out loud to myself. And I think of as many people as I can who might be reading it. Is this message and what I'm intending to do reaching them in the best
Mhm.
way? Is it doing its job? And I do that though after the material's all out. And that's what makes a great editor at a publishing house or even one you hire as a freelance editor. They are very skilled at helping you bridge that gap between your own mind and the mind of the reader. And I've
Right.
learned over the last 20 years how valuable editors are in that
Yeah.
area.
I have a good friend who wrote a book and just said the same thing about editing. It's like you think of editing as, oh, you're just condensing things down to make it fit. It's like, no, you have to make sure
There's a
that the
tone.
message is
Yeah.
connected to
Hmm.
everything. And there's a science to it, but that's the art of it at the same time.
Correct. It takes a high level of self-awareness to do it, and you have to be humble because you have to
Mhm.
hear feedback on your work, and you have to trust a good editor.
Yeah. So with the new book Invincible, I want to dive into it and some of the key elements that I got from it, as well as some of the
Okay.
specific messages. Before that, though, I always like to hear about the origin stories of people who get into this field. Mindset, spirituality. It's something that I think just in the macro we're all aiming to get more of, but
Hmm.
then getting into the coaching world of it is a much different journey. How did this process start for you of your first experiences and then inevitably wanting to get into the world of helping people and get into coaching?
Yeah, my journey's definitely a different one. I was a seeker since a very young age of understanding some of the big existential questions in life. I wanted to understand what we're doing here, what the point of all this is.
Mhm.
And it was sparked. I've written about this in all three books, but it sparked when I went on a camping trip at 14. And it was nighttime when we got there to the cabin, and I went out and I looked up. I could not believe what I was seeing above my head. I could not believe there were that many stars in the sky. I've never seen it before. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago where there's a lot of light pollution, and you just don't see stars like that. We were up in Minnesota near the Canadian border. But it sparked something deep within me that asked thousands of questions about that. Like, why is that there above our head every night? We don't understand more of it. So it sent me on this journey my whole life to sort of understand and figure out more of the meaning of life. And as I went through life, I thought I was doing everything that would help me attain happiness because that's what the quest was. I grew up in a fairly unstable household at times. My parents ended up getting divorced in my teens. I left home to go to school out west from Chicago and was on my own journey trying to find happiness. And I thought I was accumulating those things. Put myself through school, got a degree, fell in love, got married, got a job in the finance industry at the time, which is where I got my degree. And everything seemed to be going well, but I didn't know what the answers were to happiness. I thought this was
Mm.
it, and it wasn't satiating me. So I was hanging on to the last thing, which pop culture tells you is money. And I realized one day that I was working with all these people that had tons of money that weren't happy. And all of a sudden, the last thing on my checklist for happiness was gone because money wasn't going to do it. Because obviously, these people had a lot of money and a lot of them weren't happy. So that's not the answer. Then I was
Mm.
in big trouble. Then I was scared. Then I hit my knees in a sense of fear and wonder and yearning to know that I'd never felt before. And I threw my hands up, and not being religious or spiritual at the time, I just said, I can't go another day unless I understand what the purpose of life is. That's how deep this yearning was. And I asked these questions out to life, to God, to the universe, and then I let it go. And then I went back into my life in kind of a daze. And a couple weeks later, I was in a seminar for the finance industry, and one of the things that the instructor was saying, because he had written a book on the psychology of trading markets, which I thought was a fascinating angle on how you create the whole experience of, what vehicle you get in, how much money you invest, how long you're in, when you get out. And he said, you're creating the whole experience. And something hit me, Michael, on a deep level that told me that I wasn't just doing this in the finance world. I was doing this in my entire life, which revealed to me that the power was not on anything outside of me. It was on my perception and reaction to things. And
Mm.
when I realized that, I felt like I finally had a door or a window in what was formerly a doorless and windowless room. I now knew that the power, I didn't know how to use it yet fully, but I knew
Right.
it was in me. And so I was so excited. But the second thing that hit me was that I'd asked these questions 2 weeks ago and I connected the dots and I thought, wow, this is actually an answer to my question or part of it or the beginning of it. And I thought, well, isn't this cool? This is how life works. It's waiting for the right moment to bring us the awareness that we're looking for to help us get to where we want to go. And it uses everything at its disposal, whatever it can. And so in this moment, it was this seminar on finance. But it shifted me to this state of mindfulness and presence where I went into every moment after that, like, where's the insight going to come from now? Because I got a lot more questions now
Mm.
that I'm present enough to know how it works and where I might be able to get the insight. So this was the journey that took me to this moment 6 months later where the floodgates opened and not a couple questions were answered, but hundreds of questions were answered in a shift in mindfulness and insight and an expansion of consciousness I can't even put into words. That was the basis for my first book, I Am, because that insight was so grand and so big. First of all, I knew I was done in doing what I did in my former life. And
Uh-huh.
I knew I was going to be just a good servant of this awareness for the rest of my life, sharing it and writing about it. I hadn't written a book before, but I thought, this is too big not to share and see what happens in the public discourse. So I wrote I Am. It got picked up by a major publisher. It went out. I started working with people by word of mouth in relationships, business, in on spiritual quest, people that wanted to understand more about how life worked. And then something fascinating happened. Through this process, I had thought to myself, well, if I follow a lot of what's happened in the past on this, I shave my head, I put a robe on, I disappear on a mountain, right? I'm gone.
Right.
But I thought, why do I have to do that? I'm enjoying my life. I love my wife and kids. I'm coaching club baseball for my son, right? Like, I don't want to do that. I want to bring this into mainstream. So I said, how do I do that? I'd like to do that. I just asked that question out to the universe. And a month or two after that, I started getting calls from athletes, professional athletes who had read I Am and said, hey, this is what changed for my experience and my results. Do you work with athletes? It was a natural transition for me because I'd played all sports growing up, and
Mhm.
it was just easy for me. So I started working with athletes at 50 or 60% of my work. And that's how I got into the mindset work on the sports side. So that's the short story, short story of the experience. It's a major experience, but I was so excited to share that everybody has the same access to
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. It's interesting. When you said it was at that time when you had that recognition that, oh, the last bout that I was chasing for, which was money, I realized that this is not going to get me where I want to go. And it's a fearful thought from there. Like it's a very kind of lost, like in the middle of the ocean, you don't know which direction is which. And you
Exactly.
said you dropped on your knees, but then you let it go afterwards. That's a really powerful thing that you said, because I think it's very easy for us to want that answer and like I need to know that answer and then just grasp at the next thing that you think is a sign or so, but like just kind of letting it go and sitting. And then it was a couple weeks later afterwards. What was that couple weeks after like was it still like a lot of angst in your body, or did you know like, okay, now I put this out here, the answer is going to come to me? What was your mindset like around that time?
So, in reflecting back, what I realized was that humility is the path to wisdom. And the reason it is that yearning, that questioning, saying, I don't know, created space in my mind. And that space was like a vacuum. And the universe abhors a vacuum and likes to fill it. So by humbling yourself, a lot of times people have to hit rock bottom before they change, before
Yeah.
they think they've got it all figured out. Well, that was really that moment for me. I thought I had it figured out my whole life, or at least I was on track to, and I didn't anymore. And that humility created space and allowed me to be open to for wisdom to pour in. There's an old Zen story about a young student coming to a master trying to learn Buddhist studies, and they're having tea, and the master is pouring tea into the student's cup. And as he's doing so, the student's telling him how much he knows about Buddhist study, how many years he's studied, what he's learned. And meantime, the master's pouring the tea. Well, all of a sudden, the tea is overflowing the teacup and pouring on the floor. And the student says, Master, Master, my cup is full. You can't get any more tea in. And the master looks at the student and he says, your mind is like that cup. I can't get any wisdom to you with a full cup. As soon as you empty your cup, I'll be able to teach you.
Mm.
So that's the idea, is that you really have to be in a state of humility and desire and open to insight for the universe to have room to pour into you.
Yeah. It's that the concept of humility and being humble, like it's one of those things, as I say, like it's very easy to say, so challenging to do, right? Because it's like when we have a challenge or we have a problem, there's an open loop, and our mind doesn't like those open loops. We're trying to close it as quick as possible. So it's like being in that space of allowing wisdom to come in. It's a beautiful theory, but in practice, that can be a really challenging thing. In the
It,
people that I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, no, I was just going to say it can be, but it depends on your level of will and
Mm,
where your breaking point is of suffering. Right? It doesn't have to get to a level 5 level of suffering before you get the insight and information. You don't have to suffer that much. You just have to realize that humility is the path, and it's okay to let go of what you think you know that isn't working in order to open to something that might be new. And that's what I'm hoping through the work is that people realize that how to be in that state of trust and faith with life.
mhm. Is
So
that
there's
it's do you think that like getting into that space, as you said, it's almost if you get to rock bottom or you're in such a challenging time where now all the things that you thought were going to get you where you want to go, now you finally realize that is not the way. That is a like almost there's only the only thing you can do at that time is to be humble, to the divine or the universe and kind of get on your knees at that point. But as you said, you don't need to be in that space to get there. In the work that you've done with people, is that a challenging thing you've seen, or is it more challenging for people to recognize that if they're not in that space of I need to get to this next level?
Very rarely will someone come to see me if they're not ready for the
Right.
insight, for the wisdom that's going to change things. So I know when they enter the room with me or they enter the space, they're ready for this wisdom. Now, whether they take it after that and it actually implements change in their life is completely up to their free will and to them, but they're ready for the insight at least and the doorway. It's up to them to step through it. But I have seen people that have gotten the insight and just haven't been ready yet because fear creeps back in and has a hold of them and won't let them step forward into that state of liberation or change. And they're just too connected to the identity of suffering for the change. And I have seen that happen before. But athletes, that's why it's interesting with athletes because they want results, right? They
Right.
want, and one of the great attributes of so many great athletes is humility, is curiosity, is the willingness to learn. And that was one of the great realizations when I went out in the world of professional sports is that I thought a lot of the young guys, some of the rookies might be interested in this. And it was a lot of the veterans
Right.
who were great, successful athletes that are always looking for the new edge that came to this work and said, I want to learn from this. Because
Mm.
they knew that's what kept them on the edge was being ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, well, if you think of that too, a veteran who's getting in, you recognize, some of the physical ability that you have that maybe you could just dominate in ways. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
starts to depreciate a little bit, maybe not all the way, but it will, where now to get the next edge is to go into how do I outsmart this, the game here. But it's like you
100%.
see these all the times, like these are the viral clips of like the welcome to the NBA or the NFL when these people who all of a sudden they've been dominant in something for so long, so successful in the path. Now you're playing in a much different game
Oh,
where the
yeah,
person, across from you is just in the same way. They've had just them as much
absolutely.
success where it's like humility is usually one of those things that it's not a gradual thing. It's like a smack in the
It
face
smacks you
type
right.
moment at that time.
Yeah, out of desperation, you're like, wow, I thought I was in one space and now I'm up against the intentions of some of the best in the world. That's how tight the funnel gets at the professional level. There are so many great, talented athletes with mindsets that are relentless.
Mhm.
So this is the edge. And you bringing up that example also of kind of diminishing talent or aging. Now they need a new, different edge,
Mhm.
like the mental edge. That there's actually a story in the book about an athlete, just that same situation and how he overcame it.
Uh-huh. With athletes is, I mean, it's always an interesting one that we use as examples, right? Because I think there's such an objectivity to it of you can see very much like the difference of failing and success, by winning a championship or getting to the next level or staying up. With working with athletes, what did you learn about like next level mindfulness, as I know you like to describe there, with working with athletes? Like, what are the things that differentiate those that are relentless in that pursuit versus maybe the ones that they want to do this, but something is missing and they never get to that next level?
There's several things. One of them is relentless optimism. Nothing stops them. No experience, no bad experience is ever used against themselves. They might have a cooling off period or need some time, but their mind is right back into the possibilities of what they can do. The second thing, and these aren't in any particular order, but is an incredibly strong sense of self belief and worth in what they can accomplish, that they're worthy of it, that they know it's in them, and that nobody else is going to beat them. And then the third thing is a work ethic that is stratospheric
Mhm.
and so single pointed. Now, there's a lot of sacrifice in their life because of it if they're not really great at balance, right, with their relationships, because everything has to come second to a professional athlete to what they're doing. It's just the nature of what it demands for you to be that much on top of your game. And people in their life have to acknowledge that in a lot of ways they're going to be second to this pursuit because
Mm.
that's what it truly takes. And that's why they get rewarded because you've got 8 billion people in the world and these are the best in the world doing what they do
Right.
for,
Couple
for
hundred are doing this.
entertainment or
Yeah.
for sports. Yeah, exactly. So those are the three main things, but those are big things. Relentless optimism, a sense of self-worth and what drives that self-worth really underneath it all is self-appreciation and love. But it's driving their worth. And if it's not driving their sense of self-worth, if it's not coming from self-appreciation and self-love, then it's going to be a short-term experience that they're going to have to struggle and find their way back to at some
Right.
point.
With those, it's interesting. It's like, it just like knee-jerk reaction is the work ethic is something that it seems that you can work on and you can build up on by just
Hmm.
putting more hours in. Relentless optimism seems like the most challenging of having that as your default system because it's so much easier to focus on our self-limits and our self-limiting beliefs versus the potential from there. Have you seen that a lot?
Again, it can be
Uh-huh.
more difficult. I don't want to buy into that it is more difficult. It can be. It depends on the level of will of the individual and the belief system that they have about what they can accomplish. And that's really the separating piece. But anybody can adopt that
Right.
because and that's why I start the book in step one with infinite possibility, with realizing your infinite potential. Because you have to see that the possibilities are unlimited as a starting point to the invincible state of mind. You have to. If you do not see that there's infinite potential within you, then yes, those limits will have a say in your mind and prevent you from that optimism.
Mhm.
But that optimism about what is possible has to be the driving factor of it all.
That's such a powerful reframe, as you said, it can be. And I think as you were speaking there, what I realize is that just because it's more common to focus on
Right.
your self limits and your beliefs doesn't mean it's normal and that's the way to go.
That's it.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you want to get to the next level in any area of life, if you want to adopt more of an invincible and empowered state of mind, yes, the answer is yes to that.
Yeah. I want to stay on that topic of self-limiting beliefs a little bit more because as I said, it can be easier to focus on your limits. It doesn't have to be that, but what are the more common like self-limiting beliefs that you've seen with the people that you've worked with of getting in? Is there some kind of longest levers that the
I
majority of
can't,
people?
I won't, I always, I never, I'm worthless, I hate myself, I'm terrible. I mean, all these lies, and they're rampant if you don't have the tools to be able to see what the truth is about yourself. That's why I'm so passionate about this work on self realization, because self realization brings you to an unbelievable conclusion
Mhm.
about who and what you are as a human being, which is infinitely creative with the power of the universe literally at your feet when you realize that. And so that's to me what true awakening is really understanding that you own the power to shift the narrative about who you are and to work with where you are in your reality, not to avoid what the mindset and what your inertia of your upbringing, nurturing, genetics, personal experience has brought you to, and work from that point. And everybody's at a different point on that spectrum across the entire world, right? In terms of what their quote starting point is in life.
Mhm.
But everybody has the ability to come to this realization on how these self-limiting beliefs are lies.
So the language that you use, as you said right there, is the first indicator.
Yeah, people will
Yeah.
reveal their stories, through their words, but it's just it's helpful because then I can help them reflect, acknowledge, and reframe. How does it help you to say that I never do it right? Never is past, present, and future. The only truth is you haven't done it right yet. I'll buy that. That's
Mhm.
fine. But I'm not going to say never or can't.
Right.
So let's open that door a little bit so we can work from that in this moment. Because if you don't open that door, there's nowhere to go. I can't do this. Then okay, what's the point?
Yeah. my my great friend had a good reset on this of instead of saying like I am XYZ on this and says no, I've had a tendency to
Good.
go into this. And it is how powerful
Past
it just
tense.
shifts into your mind of like, yeah, this is what
Past
I've
tense.
done before, but it's not the
Correct.
identity that I have.
Exactly. That's it right there. You reframe it into its truth, which is that's what's been. And that's okay. Everybody's been on a journey of learning, right? But in this moment, you have unlimited power to change that narrative and to take on something new. And I'm not saying to fool yourself and just put rose colored glasses on, but just to understand that you can begin to shift the narrative. And by taking small steps in that direction, eventually there's a big change.
Right. So
And this is in so many different
just
areas.
recognizing the possibility of it, that starts to build on the awareness.
That's exactly why step one is realizing your infinite potential so that
I
you at
love that.
least know that that's there for you.
Yeah. You have a quote in the book that I really love that said, the mind of a true master is surprised by nothing."
Hmm.
Can you elaborate on that? What does that mean to you?
So that means that your awareness is so big that you understand the truth that anything is possible. Therefore, when it comes at you from the world in your experience, you're thrown off balance by less because you're more prepared in terms of that as a possibility. Not that you intended it or you want to see it in the world, but you're not in a state of disbelief, which puts you into shock and sort of catatonic state, or you're not in a state of resistance, which then keeps you stuck in time because you're not accepting what the truth is, and you can't be in your creative self. But the master knows that anything is possible and therefore is ready for all of it.
Hmm. When I read that, this book behind me that we talked about off camera, The Tao Te Ching, which has been a huge influence on my life. So much about that is connecting with the natural world and how everything in the world is just, going the way that it's supposed to. So there's no surprises that are going on in here. That's what I got from that is like, if you go in focusing on what you expect to happen from this, and I see this in the world of personal training and fitness all the time, like, oh, like in 30 days, I'm supposed to drop XYZ
Right.
amount of weight from here. And if I'm not at that, then it's a failure. Even though that you did all the process and you made some goals and some wins along the way, you're only focused on where you should be or what you're expected to happen at this
Mm-hmm.
time versus shifting that into, well, what if you just focus on the standards that you hold yourself to every day and then you
Right.
build a system of success? It's a much different shift. You're still doing the things that you need to do, but now you're not in a state where you are dissatisfied and just waiting for that moment of where you think you should be at that time. And that's why
Exactly.
so many people yo-yo cycle back and forth in the fitness world.
The universe loves to show us what we don't expect
Right.
because its job is to show us infinite possibility. So the universe loves to do that. You have a team that expects to win, and doesn't takes the team too lightly. Look out. Big upset in the making, right? I tell all my athletes, don't expect, intend. Intention keeps you in the process, keeps you focused on accomplishing the task. Expectation takes you out of the process and into the future of a conclusion that hasn't happened yet.
Mm,
Now that's good. In one way, there's a confidence aspect. I'm confident I can win, but you never want to get to expectation to where it's 100%, because that's when the universe likes to surprise you. You always want to stay in the active place of intending while you're confident that it can happen, but you're not taking your eye off the ball, so to speak, with
mm.
intention.
Is there a practical way that you approach that of working with yourself and people of staying out of the expectation? Because again, it can be very easy to, if everything's going well and you're winning, like you won the World Series. Oh, this is easy. Like we can do this every year. Then all of a sudden you thus expect to get there. And maybe you lose sight of like the things that actually
Little bit,
got you there in
little
that
of the
time.
edge comes off because you're forward looking at the expectation, whereas intention keeps you in the process. To answer your question, it's a simple question. Do you want to be in the most powerful and optimal state of mind to get to where you want to go? Then let's stay in the present moment with intention. Let's focus on everything we need to do right now in this moment that we're in to demonstrate the great athlete that you believe you are, or the
Mm,
great person that you believe you are, or the great person in a relationship or husband or wife or significant other that you believe you are. Let's stay in that and let's work on that and let's put the expectations away and just do this every day and keep cultivating and keep nurturing this truth about yourself. And let's let the universe do the rest.
mm. Growing up, my idol was Derek Jeter, being a huge
Mm,
Yankee fan,
yeah,
being from New York. And I grew up in a beautiful time for the Yankees because that was the dynasty of the late
yeah,
90s when they won
sure.
4 out of 5 years. But I remember,
Captain.
Derek Jeter he won the World Series 4 out of his first 5 years. And just thinking like it could have been so easy for him after that first year, second year of just being, oh, well, this is what we do. Like, we're just like, it's going to be here all the time. But no, he like, as soon as they were done, he took like a week off and then went right back into focusing on the next year afterwards in that mentality. And for me growing up, I just think, oh, well, this is just what champions do. It's like, no, not all of them do that. A lot of them
Correct.
will get there and it's more of a sense of relief when you get there rather than joy. And then you
Hmm.
just ease off the gas pedal and you go and they go off there. So it's interesting of seeing how some stay in that optimal zone afterwards and some just fall back into this zone of relief. And I think it's a good lesson for anybody in like a pursuit that they're working for of goals in their life, where if you're just focusing on the external thing that you're getting to, more money or a specific body composition or a specific physical test, and then you achieve it, if that was the only thing, then well, what happens afterwards? The sun's still going to come up
Exactly.
the next day.
And it's a subtle difference in those, I think, from seeing themselves as I am a champion versus I am a champion and a great athlete, because then the great athlete keeps going to continue to be a great athlete. The person that achieves a championship, you're right, they've achieved the goal. Now what, right? But
Mhm.
that's a different, like Michael Jordan defined himself by greatness. No one beats me. I'm the
Right.
most competitive, greatest player ever. So the championship was just a result of that. So he just kept going on that theme every single year of dominance in his mind that he was a great competitor, great athlete. And that's what drove him. And then the result, the ancillary result was championships.
Mm.
But it wasn't what drove him every day.
Right. You mentioned a part where I really liked was energy we project is mirrored back to us by the world. So how does energy influence our experiences and like our process of getting to this next level?
So this goes to a deeper understanding of how life is working with each one of us.
Mhm.
Life is helping us conclude the definition of who we believe that we are. We have the authority and the free will to define ourselves creatively how we want. The problem is that not a lot of people are conscious of how they're creating that definition. So, if one of the definitions somebody holds is I am unworthy, then the energy of that idea, I am unworthy, no matter how you try and cover it on the outside, is what life's going to pick up on. And then life's going to find the people, places, and events to give you the validation of that I am statement, that I am unworthy. That's how powerful our I am statements and our narrative is. So life wants to meet you, and the ego goes out as the bridge to try and get this accomplished. It finds the right people, places, and events to discredit you or to make you feel unworthy. That's what's so exciting about this, because once you realize this, you're like, wow, if I just start to learn how to reframe my narrative and I can understand it in a way where it's authentic change, not a manufactured change where I just say these mantras every day, but where I really do the self-realization work, the real trench work to find out what has been holding me back from a state of worthiness, and I change that to I am worthy. Watch the magic happen in the universe. Watch how it bounces back that energy, and you start to get the experience of feeling worthy. People treat you differently. Relationships, business, whatever area you're in, you start to get a different feeling back from the world that mirrors how you are now seeing who you are. That's really, if I had to pick one of like the top five things in all the books, like this is it,
Yeah.
right? Is really realizing the power of that narrative. I open this book with a statement: if you knew how powerful you really are, you would never stop smiling.
Right. Yeah.
But
It's
that's what gets me so excited. It's like,
sure. I mean, I mean, the famous Marianne Williamson quote, right? That our deepest fear is not that we
mm,
are inadequate, our deepest fear is we're powerful beyond measure.
that's exactly right, because
Yeah.
that's unbounded, right? Inadequate has boundary, and the ego loves boundary to know where we stand. But unlimited, ooh, that can be a little scary. And what I'm trying to offer in the book is it's not. It's actually the doorway to everything. It's
Yeah.
enriching, it's fulfilling, it's exciting. Um, so,
With So with that, like creating affirmations, like saying I am worthy, I've had just kind of an interesting back and forth in my own mind about affirmations and how powerful they are because it can be easy to like write these out, but as you just said there, are you authentically creating change or just kind of speaking the words out? If you
correct.
just say them, it and you don't feel it in that moment, then you're just kind of, it's like winking in the dark versus actually like, versus
Yeah,
like really
right.
like speaking it and like making a physiological change from there. How do you approach that of helping people like find the right like right affirmations or like the right, mantra or whatever it is to elicit that response and start creating that authentic change?
So first of all, the affirmations have to be believable. You
Yeah.
cannot force it. You can't swim upstream, right? You have to go with the flow. So the affirmations have to coincide with what you believe. So a lot of times what I'll do when someone's in a process is instead of saying, I am a great person, let's just take a generic one, they can adopt this idea, I am becoming a great person. That's believable by the mind because they're in the process. But I never want them to take on something that they don't believe because then it's like you said, winking in the dark. It's a waste of time. So I am becoming. That's good. Now you're in the process. And eventually we'll get to I am a great person. But that's one way. And the second, probably the bigger way, is we do all the self-realization work, the self-reflection work, understanding the truth of their past and how at each moment they have done the best they can at every moment of existence with the knowledge and awareness and consciousness that they had in order to help relieve them of so much guilt, shame, regret, all the poisons of the mind that weigh someone down that makes them gravitate towards negative I am statements. And
Mm,
once they realize more of the truth of themselves because they've done the self realization work, then they can start to take control of the narrative with some new statements that are now more aligned with this new emerging soul that is more compassionate with the self, more accepting, more loving, more appreciative. And that now you're starting to ski downhill. Now you're starting to swim
mm,
with the flow um, and with the current.
yeah.
So that's how I do it in order to make it more help them be more authentic.
Yeah.
Off, yeah.
How much of the like the past work and self-realization do you think is letting go and removing things that don't serve you anymore versus adding like new good things that, could benefit you, going
Well,
into
one
that?
has to come before the other.
Yeah.
So it's you have to be able to free your soul of the lies before you can adopt the new, more expanded results. And I
Mhm.
have in the book actually a scale that shows you, based on how you feel about who you are, what your bubble of possibilities is that you will not be able to go outside of, that the universe can't grace you with if you don't feel worthy of, or if you have a quick snap outside of it and you experience it, it doesn't last because everything has to come back to the mean. The mean is how you feel about yourself. And so there's this scale that shows you, based on the number you say, what your bubble of possibilities is. And the idea is to keep expanding that through a greater understanding of your worth, greater understanding of what's you're capable of in
Mm.
terms of your experience as a human being.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of, going back to the story about the cup overflowing from there. Like if you don't take care of these things that have bogged you down in the past and you just start adding more shit on top of it, it's just flowing
Right.
out. It's just like there's no more room for anything in here. So,
Right. Yeah. And if you don't learn, if you're not open to learning because you're resistant of truth,
mhm,
of how your past has unfolded, instead of looking at it as simply a perfection of the unfolding of you that's gotten you to this moment, then you're never gonna change. How can you change something that you won't acknowledge or won't learn from? You
right.
have to be able to look at what has happened to be able to be empowered on how to change that.
Yeah. And not with the woe is me mentality of I wish this didn't happen before and go into that. You mentioned in the book the concept of trusting life, and
Right.
in like in your own experience and journey, like I mean you did all the check marks of going to school again, the job in finance, the kids, the family, going for money, and then kind of find this out. Well, if it didn't go in that direction, maybe you wouldn't ever got to this state of this realization if you didn't go through those steps before. And it can be very easy to say, oh, I wish I learned these things earlier in life or not, but it's all happening sequentially in the right order.
Three big lies. Woulda, coulda, Coulda, woulda, shoulda, coulda. Thank you. There it is. Woulda, shoulda, coulda are the three biggest lies, and they keep you stuck in time
Mhm.
because there only is what is. So why not just work from this moment, harness the power of what's in it, and be grateful that you this information's flowing to you now, right? That the
Yeah.
universe is speaking. We're having a conversation. We're just the bridge in this moment for this awareness. There's a million different ways it can come through, but in this moment, it's this podcast. That's pretty exciting, you
Yeah.
know.
Talking about faith, which is, one of the big levers that you talk about in this book and other ones as well. Faith is a big word, and it could be in yourself, in, God, in the divine, however you want to describe it.
Hmm.
But how powerful has faith been in your life and the work that you've done? And how do you define like faith and how do you practice that in your own life now? I know you said like you had the great experience at 14 at the lake, which kind of kicked off a bunch of stuff and then it's kind of transcended from there. How has faith impacted you in your life now?
Well, faith is the magic elixir to everything. Nothing gets accomplished without faith, right? No one's getting on an airplane, taking an elevator, getting in a car without some element of faith on a subconscious level, which is a belief that you're going to be okay, because otherwise you wouldn't do it, right? Or going into a relationship or testing your skills out in sports. It's all based on faith. So, faith to me is being able to trust that whatever happens is for your benefit on your journey towards what you ultimately want to experience. And that can be challenging at times for people that have gone through some very hard traumas in life. And I have great respect for anybody that's been through some very tough things that are listening now. But I do know that somewhere deep in that experience is something for that individual that's going to strengthen them in terms of who they are and what they know they can overcome. Because look, life has got us to this moment through everything we thought we'd never get through before. And everybody's had those moments. How am I ever going to get through this? And yet here we are, right? How can you not have faith in a universe that has birthed you into existence to this moment? That
Mhm.
it wouldn't cradle and nurture you through the process. That doesn't mean you don't have to go through lessons. That doesn't mean there isn't, potentially some suffering and some pain and different things that we all go through. That's a natural part of life. On the other side of that is joy and happiness, but that's a natural part of life. But to just have faith that life knows what it's doing in terms of the right time to get you the right insight and information can be very, very calming
Mhm.
and sort of catalyzing in terms of helping you to speed up this process of the evolution of mind and mindset and what you're trying to accomplish in the world because you're resting in that space. Whether you're deeply religious and you believe it's a faith in God, whether you're spiritual and believe in universal faith and the source of everything, or even if you're scientific and agnostic, you have to question at times how this is happening at this moment, right? How
Sure.
this insight is coming in, how the universe works. I mean, even Einstein, knew there was something divine behind all of it.
Yeah.
That was
Well, and I
moving.
think, I think so many people can resonate or take a piece of your story, at the lake of seeing that and have their own experience from that. I've had that in, myself where you see just kind of the world in this like awe-inspiring place and you recognize like it's just something different that hits you. But what you said there, Howard, of just the shift of having faith, I think it's interesting because it's very easy to think that, oh, like it's this immediate shift. If you're going through some tough things, like and you tell that person, oh, life is working for you, not to you, and stuff like that, they're gonna be like, fuck off. Like this
Right,
is this is a
exactly.
terrible thing.
Yeah,
But it doesn't mean it's going to completely shift over and everything's going to be fine. But it can just tick it a little bit more into a calming state of, okay, like there is a lesson here that I can learn from. And maybe it's not going to get you to feel great in the moment. And I think that is, a lesson that a lot of us can take of, just because you get a good insight or a good idea, it doesn't mean that now everything is going to be hunky dory and going
correct.
to be perfect,
Right.
but it's just shifting you into a different
Yeah.
perspective. And I think that's a powerful thing that you can have of practice of faith. And that's what I've
Yeah.
seen.
It's very galvanizing in terms of the acceleration of your understanding of things, your general state of mind, and then that state of mind and what it produces
Mhm.
versus a more resistant, fear dominated state of mind. You're in a more faithful state of mind. There's a different energy coming off of that. And that energy is going to produce different conditions.
Hmm.
And different conditions are going to lead to the probabilities of a different experience. So that's where faith can be helpful, but it has to be authentic because you've really thought about it and it kind of hits you differently at a certain time in your life. Like, wow,
Yeah.
it is interesting how this all works and unfolds.
Do you have a method you use for practicing faith? Is it journaling? Is it meditation? Kind of thought? Is there something specific that you do to kind of keep yourself on that path?
One of the great ways, if I ever feel myself out of alignment, is I go back to gratitude. Because when I'm in gratitude and I find something to be grateful for, even if it's my own breath and life and existence, it brings me back to faith.
Mhm.
So I think gratitude is a very grounding thing to shift you when you're in a state that's out of balance. Find something to be grateful for, work on that, and then behind that, you'll find faith.
Mhm. Yeah. I love that. Gratitude. It's one of those like it's been a word adopted by like kind of a woo-woo based clan on it. So
Mm-hmm.
it like gets kind of,
Yep.
drawn away. But just because something cliche doesn't mean that it's true from there. I think the
Right.
same thing, like just shifting into just a state of just being grateful for something in there it's such a powerful shift over for the day.
Because when you're in a negative state, you're focused on a narrative that the world's out to get you and that, you can't or you won't or it's always going to be this way. And again, when you narrow the possibilities, that's why you suffer, is from a narrowing of possibilities. Because what's the truth of life? Infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
So to get that shift to happen and to get yourself out of that sort of swirl, what's it called in the lake when it's around a drain? There's a word for it. I can't think of it. When something swirls, whirlpool.
Oh,
Out of
whirlpool.
that
Yeah. Okay.
whirlpool, um, the rope out of it is okay. What can I find to be grateful for? I know this
Mhm.
sucks, but I got to find something. And that is the rope that slowly pulls you out of it. And before you know it, you're back to being thankful. You've shifted your perspective. And then you can get back to faith that things are going to be okay. But you can't do it from a negative emotional state of mind. That's only going to take you darker and deeper into
Yeah.
the mess.
Yeah. I love that. Um, Howard Falco, ladies and gentlemen. Howard, I really appreciate you jumping on. I've learned so much from you.
My
The,
pleasure.
the self-awareness, relentless optimism. I mean, a couple real key insights that I wrote down in this one, I think is so powerful. And, personally for me, always trying to look at that next level that I'm aiming for. And I know so many people listening are doing the same thing. I really love the work that you're doing. So again, I
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time today.
Oh, my honor, and thank you so much for having me on and for a great conversation.
No doubt. Yeah. If people want to check out more of your work, Invincible's out now. What's the best place that they can go and check you out?
So, yeah, thank you. My new book, Invincible, is out. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any independent bookstore. And then my website is howardfalco.com, and my Instagram is Howard Falco if they want to connect with me and my work and see everything that I'm doing.
Perfect. Great. I'd love to have you back sometime, Howard. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Love to do it.
Awesome. Listeners, thank you so much. Catch you on the next one. Peace.